Action.
I've shot a lot of team media days throughout my sports videography career. Some at big budgets and some definitely did not. Either way, the expectations are always high because this is the one day that's gonna make or break that team's content strategy for their entire season. So in this video, I'm gonna give you a bunch of tips to really help you make the most of that day, specifically when you don't have a lot of money to work with. The idea of a media day is to get the entire team at the same place on the same day and film a bunch of content that will be used throughout the season on the Jumbotron during games and on social media as well. So the content you get out of a day like this is typically used for player introductions, hype reels, marketing messages, things like that.
That was my rapper side right there.
And the first thing you should do way before the media day even starts is figure out your budget. Because with a lot of money, you can have a concept that's based solely on the look of your content with a bunch of tube lights, LED screens, smoke machines, all that stuff. And if you know what you're doing, that can look pretty dope. But if you don't have any money, then you gotta find another way to make your content look good, and the best way to do that is simply to be on brand. You basically want the background of your shots to be inspired by the culture and the values of that team. So for example, if the team that you're shooting is part of a school, try to film in and around the school at a location that truly represents that school. Something that all the students would automatically recognize and feel represented by. If the team represents the city, you could film on location somewhere that means something for that community. For example, this court is inside a sports center where all the locals play basketball themselves, so it shows how close the team is to the local community. Otherwise, you can also lean on the team's brand by dressing up the team's locker rooms or even the gym. But if all you have access to is a very generic looking room with plain walls that don't represent your team in any way, in that case, I would simply do a green screen shoot and worry about the branding in post-production. The downside of a green screen shoot is that it is more expensive because you need a few more things. But the upside is that you can really let your imagination run wild if you know what you're doing. For example, in this case, I was working for the Collingwood Magpies. And a magpie is an Australian bird that is black and white and looks like a crow. So we created this grungy storm/bird attack concept for the player introductions, and everybody loved it. Anyway, now let's talk equipment, and by the way, you'll be able to find every piece of equipment that I talk about in this video on my kit.co page. I actually made a kit specifically for media day equipment, which I'll put a link to in the description below. So if you're shooting on location, here's what I think your bare minimum should be in terms of specific equipment to pull off a decent media day on a very limited budget. First of all, you need at least one key light to make sure that your subject's face is properly exposed. A darker background is okay, but your subject has to be exposed properly. There are a bunch of very affordable lights on the market these days, but make sure that they come with some sort of diffusion so that the light is not too harsh on your subject. And if your light doesn't come with any diffusion, you can always use a simple white sheet, or better yet, just bounce your light off a white wall or any white surface, really. This is actually what I do when I'm filming in my office. As you can see, I have these sound blankets that I put up to kill the echo in the room, and I also use them to bounce my light. The next thing you need is a gimbal. I mean, it's not mandatory, but I just think it makes your shots way more dynamic and allows you to be more creative during the shoot. For example, I always like to do a few shots where I act as a defender and the subject either shoots in front of me, gets in my face, goes around me, or even sometimes over me. And since the camera movements during a typical media day shoot are nothing too crazy, you can definitely go for a cheaper gimbal as long as it can support the weight of your camera and your lens. And speaking of lenses, that's the last piece of equipment that I think is very important in a situation like this. I always use a prime lens personally for multiple reasons. Prime lenses, because they only have one focal length, they are usually really good at that specific length, much better than a zoom lens, for example. They'll be sharper, they'll have less small technical issues like chromatic aberration, things like that, and they'll also have a much wider aperture. All that for a much more affordable price than if all those things were in a zoom lens. For example, I like to use this VILTROX 24mm 1.8 lens. This is a full frame lens, which at 24mm I think is the perfect focal length to use on a gimbal. And with that wide aperture, it allows me to really keep the attention and focus on my subject and keep him super sharp at all times. To give you an idea, this lens on the VILTROX website is only $379, while the Sony G Master equivalent is $1,400. Not only that, but I do have a business relationship with VILTROX, so if you use the promo code BTG10 to buy this lens or anything else on their website, you will get an extra 10% off the original price. And to be honest, yes, the Sony G Master is an f1.4 instead of 1.8, and it is slightly sharper on the edges, but in the middle of the shot, personally, I can't see much of a difference. So there you go. An affordable light gimbal and prime lens are the three accessories you really need to pull off a decent media day with no money. And if you're curious to learn how to set up a professional media day, this time with a decent budget, just click on the video on your screen right now, and I'll see you guys there.